This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth, for competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty, for the Republic.
I'm the guy who at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meatpackers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Major news this week. I've been involved in a lot of it, as you know. I appeared on behalf of the stepson of Dr. Jerome Corsi, who has been a target of Robert Mueller's special counsel investigation before the grand jury here in Washington, D.C. Came off very well. The testimony was very short. We're confident that Dr. Corsi will not be indicted. We're confident that we can move forward now. But that being said, we had the indictment of Roger Stone just last Friday. That's a major development in the case. The FBI, apparently with 29 or so agents, raided his house at dawn. We had cable news networks there, which obviously had been tipped off that this was going to be happening. Stone was taken into custody. He was booked in the federal courthouse in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where I've been many, many times as a Florida lawyer. And he came out and gave a statement. But it's clear from reading this indictment that there's a reference in there to person one. And you can read this indictment by going to LarryKlayman.com or CorsiNation.com. On behalf of Dr. Corsi, my co-counsel and I, David Gray, have issued a statement. I want you to study that statement because we confirm that Dr. Corsi's person number one. And the good news is that the special counsel, Robert Mueller, did not accuse Dr. Corsi of any wrongdoing. In fact, it's clear from reading that indictment that Dr. Corsi has fully cooperated. The references that are made in that indictment with regard to Dr. Corsi maintains are true. They are true. Dr. Corsi has said he will never lie before his creator under oath or otherwise. And you can read more about that in his book, Silent No More, the inside story of this Mueller investigation, which concerns him, at Amazon.com. Now, in a short while, I'm going to bring Dr. Corsi on because I'm proud of him as my client. He's hung tough. He was asked to lie by special counsel Robert Mueller and his prosecutors. He said, I won't do that. I cannot do that in front of God. He was given a sweetheart plea deal, according to the prosecutors. It wasn't so sweetheart, pleading guilty to one count of perjury with a recommendation of no sentence time. But, of course, when you plead guilty to perjury, you'll never be able to vote again in most states. Your reputation is tarred. And Dr. Corsi has done no wrong. But reading this indictment, it is extremely heartening that it's clear the special counsel did not accuse him of any wrongdoing. And given the fact that I was in front of the special counsel yesterday, right outside the grand jury room, waiting for Dr. Corsi's stepson, Andrew Stetner, to testify and be finished, we were available for any questions that might be asked. There were no questions asked. I greeted Aaron Zielinski, who is one of the head prosecutors there. And this is important, this development today, and we're going to talk about it, not just the ramifications with regard to my client and my clients, but also with regard to the President of the United States. So I'm introducing now my patriotic client, my friend, and my great client, Dr. Jerome Corsi, who has stood very tough against the special counsel, Robert Mueller. He said he would not lie under oath before his creator. He would not take a plea agreement, as I've said, that would cause him to do that would testify against the president. Of course, as we set forth in our statement today, he is person one in the indictment of special counsel Robert Mueller. But I want to get his take on what's been going on. He clearly was accused of no wrongdoing. He's cooperated fully. And, in fact, the references that are made in that indictment are correct as concerns Dr. Corsi. So I want to bring him in. If you want to learn more about this, you can go to his book, It's Silent No More, which is on Amazon.com. It gives you the inside story of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. Jerry, what's your reaction to the indictment of Roger Stone?
Well, Larry, it's good to be with you. I mean, first of all, it was shocking, I believe, the way in which the FBI shows up in full riot gear at 7 in the morning with an army and pounds on the door. I mean, this looks like it's Nazi Germany. Roger Stone is a well-known and accomplished political operative with a long history going back to really Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon. I mean, this is a person who has to be considered accomplished, and here he's being treated as if he were a drug dealer. It's frightening to think of the power that this Mueller special prosecutor has to wage what's kind of like guerrilla political theater. And my heart went out to Roger and his family when I saw this happening. It's frightening. And, as we're not cleared yet, I mean, I don't know if we ever are cleared with this investigation, but it's frightening to think that the same thing could happen to me in my door. And there's no cause for it. We've cooperated extensively with Mueller. We handed over everything voluntarily, computers, cell phones, email accounts, everything that's relevant or material at all, I've offered and given willingly. And I don't see that I've done anything wrong, Larry. And I think the indictment of Roger affirms that there's no wrongdoing on my part.
No, I would agree completely. And in many ways, reading that today, and I read it several times, and people can see it at LarryKlayman.com or CorsiNation.com, that confirms that. You've also written a book, Silent No More, and it tells really the inside story of what went on with regard to you and Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation, your interactions with the prosecutors. Tell us about that and tell our listeners how they can get a hold of that, because that's really important to view it in this context, in the totality of what went on with regard to your experience with the Mueller people.
Well, Larry, the book, and it's now also an audio book at iTunes. I narrated the 9.5 hours of Silent No More, so you could hear my own emotions going through this 40 hours of interrogation by Mueller over 2 months, 6 sessions. This was in September and October of this year. I mean, it was frightening. Of 2018, it was frightening. And you're in a small room, picked up by the FBI at your hotel, and driven to this unmarked FBI building at an undisclosed location in southeast Washington, and they take your cell phones and your laptops away from you, all electronics. You're brought up into a conference room that's internal to the building. There's no windows. You have a conference table, and across the conference table sitting are 3 of the prosecutors and the special counselor, maybe 6 to 9 FBI, this army of interrogators, and it's you and your attorney. At that time, it was me and David Gray, who I think has done an excellent job, and I greatly appreciate the work you're doing, Larry, joining the team. But they treat you with Gestapo-like questioning. I mean, even day one, they treat you like a criminal. I forgot a couple of emails, and they all stand up and stomp out of the room, call my attorney into the next conference room, and I'm left there to pace around in this conference room with no windows, no electronics, a little bubble up on the ceiling. I feel like if you're watching me in another conference room an hour or more, they all come back in and say that I lied to them, and now they can throw me in federal prison the rest of my life. That's how it started out. And because I'd forgotten some emails, I had not downloaded my 2016 emails prior to the first day of this voluntary interview, because I didn't want to change the computers from the state they were in the last day I used them. And I hadn't seen my 2016 emails. When they sent me home for 10 days, I did get to download the emails. It was hard. That computer barely worked. And I found the emails in question. I came back and I amended the testimony. But, Larry, when they wanted me, when it all blew up because I could not name any contact I had, I'd have no contact with Julian Assange or WikiLeaks, never have in any fashion, direct or indirect. That blew up the last 20 hours. And then they want me to plead to a crime I didn't commit. It's the first day's testimony, the memory mistakes, when they didn't allow me to look at the emails. And this is not the crime of knowingly and willfully giving them information you know to be false on a material subject with the intent to deceive them. I did not do that. I couldn't remember a couple of emails, and now they want me to plead to a crime I didn't commit. Well, I wouldn't swear before God and a judge that I committed. I couldn't bring myself to think to go into federal court, put my hand up on a Bible, and say I committed this crime when I know I did not. I went in and tell the truth. I believe I did to the best of my ability. And at 72 years of age, my memory was terrible. I'm not a human tape recorder. I can't play back incidents from 2016, conversations and emails. The whole experience, Larry, belongs in Nazi Germany. That's how Mueller's operating.
Yeah, it was a shocking scene this morning. I've seen it before with other clients. You know, what happened with Cliven Bundy, the rancher in Nevada. They sent in sharpshooters. They surrounded him. They threatened his family. They killed his cattle. They tased his sons. They assaulted his sister Margaret. The federal government is out of control, and nobody's in charge at the Justice Department, Jerry. The Justice Department actually, sits on top of what Mueller's doing. He works for them. But I do think that what happened today and this week in general is that it's clear that you are, in effect, being told that you didn't do anything wrong, and it would be unwise for the special counsel to indict you. And we'll get into that on the other side of the break.
Dangerous.
You don't care. Use the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special prosecutor.
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom
the
Watch,
reason it would not be wise for the special counsel to indict my client, Jerry Corsi, is because of what's going on up to now. I mean, we've talked about it, and it doesn't put the special counsel in a positive light. If they were ever to put Jerry on the stand or indict him, he'd have to tell the story about what's going on, the same story that he wrote about in Silent No More, and we've talked about in the last several weeks with regard to this claimed plea agreement, which was no real plea agreement at all, which would have caused him to plead to one count of perjury, destroy his reputation and his standing before God, and he simply couldn't do it. But if there ever was to be indictment, we could challenge Mueller's mandate. We could challenge his authority. No one's really done that so far. Just a third-tier witness, Andrew Miller, has done that. No one's taken the president and tried to help him the way Dr. Corsi has by challenging these actions. It's really hard for me to understand why the president and his lawyers haven't done it himself, but we're doing it. And, Jerry, I want to commend you for that because you've given me the authority to do it on your behalf. And if Mueller were to bring an indictment, we would have even a more direct way to challenge his mandate and authority.
Well, Larry, the Mueller team hides behind the massive, and I think out of control power of the federal criminal system, the Department of Justice, where they can terrorize people, they can destroy your family, they can have to put you through months and months of not only economic hardship. The costs of this are tremendous. You lose your jobs, you lose your clients, you lose your income. Your family's thinking it's all going to be broken up and you could go to prison. This is all uncalled for. I did nothing wrong. And I to this day affirm that I told the truth. I think this indictment shows I did nothing wrong. There's no wrongdoing. I passed on a couple of emails from Roger Stone to Ted Malloch in London about going to see Assange. There was no crime to go see Assange. I did my doctoral dissertation in 1972 at Harvard on the Pentagon Papers case, which was U.S. New York Times v. U.S. And clearly, the New York Times and the Washington Post had a right under the First Amendment to publish material that Daniel Ellsberg, an employee of the RAND Corporation, a federal-funded organization, had stolen from a classified Pentagon report on the Vietnam War that showed that early on in the Vietnam War, the Johnson administration knew it was a war they couldn't win. And now today, that's turned against us to say, we're criminals because we all wanted to know, legally had a right to know what Julian Assange had after the July 22nd, 2016 dump of 40,000 emails from the Democrats on Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was chairing the Democratic National Committee at that time. She had to resign, and Assange said he had more. But, Larry, the key point I want to make is that the Justice Department is in control of politically motivated criminals who want to weaponize politics so that they can oppose conservatives, Christians, those who believe in Jesus Christ, those who support Donald Trump, while exonerating the actual crimes committed by Hillary Clinton and deep state operatives like this Peter Strzok and his lover Lisa Page. And my heart goes out to Roger Stone because reading this indictment, it's more process crimes. I don't see any charge that has to do with collusion with Russia. These are all, statements made to Congress that are alleged to be a lie and other process crimes. And what's attributed to me as person one is absolutely no wrongdoing whatsoever.
Well, and that's the good news. And, of course, you've pushed back this week. We amended our complaint. We don't have much time, Jerry. We'll bring you back next week as well for new developments. But we amended the complaint to include interference by the Washington Post and its owner, Jeff Bezos, is worth $170 billion that killed your relationship with InfoWars and Alex Jones and Dr. Jones, the father of Alex. And, I mean, everything's swirling around, but you stay calm. And we are certain, and you and I both have a belief in Jesus Christ and God, and we know that his good grace and his intervention will in the end come through for all of us. So thank you for being on today, and God bless you, Jerry.
God bless you, Larry. Thank you very much, and God bless your listeners. I appreciate the opportunity to let everybody know what injustice is being done in America.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I want to introduce you to a really good old friend, one of the icons of the conservative movement. His name is John Gizzi. He's the White House correspondent and chief political correspondent for Newsmax. And Newsmax, of course, is my favorite, along with Radio America, notwithstanding the fact that my friend Chris Ruddy runs it. But John has been there a very long time. We've known each other a long time. He's really an expert in politics and anything revolving around it. And I want to get his take on the indictment of Roger Stone today, which we've talked about earlier. And I also want to get his take on what's going on with regard to the border wall. The president made a statement today at the White House with his cabinet around him. So, John, thank you for coming on Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Great to hear from you.
Great to hear from you, Larry. And after an introduction like that about the only thing a gentleman can do is die.
Yeah, well, in any event, at least we'll die happy. So,
yes, right.
Let me know what your thoughts are on these two subjects.
Well, beginning with Roger Stone, I take it at face value. What Roger said was simply that these are charges dealing with him. He has pled not guilty to all of them, from perjury to tampering with a witness. And most critically, he said he will not bring the president in it. In a sense, he underscored the statement from White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders that this has nothing to do with the president. And my guess is it will be a separate trial. And unlike George Papadopoulos or Paul Manafort or others, he will not draw the prosecutors and the law into the Trump campaign or the alleged Russian involvement. It's going to be about Roger Stone, and he feels confident enough to be talking to reporters, period.
What do you think is likely to happen going forward with regard to the president? I mean, it's clear to me that the real target here is President Trump, and they want his head on a plate. They're obviously using Roger Stone and others as a way to achieve that. Roger Stone may hang tough on that. He probably will. But in terms of the overall thrust of this thing, do you agree with me that the president's the one who's essentially in the target?
I have no doubt about it. And remember one thing. They have picked at people who have other problems in life, a George Papadopoulos, a Paul Manafort, and they have squeezed at them. And it has been said for a long time, going back to the trial of Teamster President James Hoffa, that when the government keeps coming at you with unlimited resources, you're bound to back down and cooperate in the end or plea bargain. Roger Stone, and I don't know what his financial situation is, but he seems ready to do battle with them till the last dog is hung. And my guess is that where others may be brought in to give states evidence against the president or try and make a case against him, they will not be so successful with Mr. Stone.
Well, I was helpful that clarification there. Of course, we don't know exactly what's going to happen going forward, but let's hope that's the case. And in any event, he does obviously have the possibility of a pardon. But notwithstanding, let's talk a little bit about the president's press conference today with the cabinet members around him. And, what's happening in that regard. I want to get your analysis. I have an analysis there. But let me hear from you first before I, color your views.
30 minutes into the press announcement, he took no questions, you'll recall. Several of my colleagues and I were looking around, and before you know it, you heard, there's Sonny Perdue, the Secretary of Agriculture. There's John Bolton talking to Elaine Chao, the Secretary of Transportation. And there's the Vice President standing next to Secretary of State Pompeo. Before it was over, there was the senior White House staff, Chief of Staff Mulvaney, Counselor Kellyanne Conaway, and, of course, National Security Advisor Bolton with the entire cabinet. And when the president made his statement that the government was reopening, they all applauded in unison. My guess is that the president did want someone to cheer on his remarks, and he certainly was not going to get it from the reporters. So he had his own Greek chorus right there, his administration, and they did a pretty good job of applauding him on.
One of the things that struck me, and I love this president, you know that, John, we've talked.
Oh, yeah.
Is that he did, in my view, cave in to the Democrats today. And and Nancy Pelosi in particular obviously wants to have a State of the Union on Tuesday. But, of course, the threat of declaring an emergency and getting his border wall, if they can't negotiate that in the next 3 weeks, and that's the reason he says he's agreeing to a bill to reopen the government, I think is fraught with danger if he doesn't make good on that. I think his presidency will effectively be over if he does not make good on that, if they can't negotiate as predicted, a border wall with Pelosi and Schumer in the next 3 weeks. What do you think?
let's put it out on the table. This is a president who kept the government closed for a record 34 days, or as he would say it, Democratic lawmakers on Capitol Hill kept it closed because they wouldn't go along with his idea of the border wall. Be that as it may, I agree with you, Larry, that come February 15th, his deadline, if he does not dip into the emergency powers that he has, and I've looked into this with differing viewpoints and differing sources, he has every right to go into other appropriations bills and then order the Army Corps of Engineers to build the wall or the steel straits. Failure to do so would mean he's given up his last opportunity to build that wall, as he said frequently in the campaign. That would mean a loss of his base, a disappointment with the conservative movement, and a feeling that Trump, the ultimate non-politician, can't be trusted any more than any other politician. In effect, his death warrant in politics. My guess is he'll declare that state of emergency because I don't see how Speaker Pelosi and Minority Leader Schumer can go back from the position they held yesterday, today, and will hold tomorrow.
There's a catch-22 to that, John, however.
Sure.
As a lawyer, I can tell you, a lawyer of going on 42 years, the Democrats and the left, environmental groups and others, will be into court quickly. It will probably be the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California, which is in the Ninth Circuit, highly leftist. Mm-hmm. They'll get an injunction, and it then comes to the ability to appeal that quickly all the way to the Supreme Court to be able to implement the building of the wall. And people are going to be asking right now, does Trump anticipate that happening? Does this simply let the pressure off of him right now to open the government? Because the prospects of the courts sustaining this, even though I agree with you, it's totally legal, 100% legal. But our courts are so broken today, they're so politicized. And Chief Justice John Roberts, when it gets to the Supreme Court, he's been trying to please the people in the boudoirs of Georgetown these days. You don't know how the thing's going to come out. So Trump took a very risky gamble here because if the courts don't sustain what he did, then he's in difficulty with the base.
Yes, and talking to Michael Brown, famed as the Federal Emergency Management Administrator under George W. Bush, when Hurricane Katrina occurred, he and the then Attorney General had drafted a statement for the president to declare a state of emergency over Katrina, certainly justifiable circumstances. And what happened was they showed the draft to the president, and he said very simply and to the point, let me call the governor of Louisiana, a Democrat, Kathleen Blanco. She said she had problems with the federalization of authority over state officials. And in the end, Bush told her, well, you don't have to worry about it. I'm not going to sign this. He feared anything that would interfere with the recovery after Katrina. And if something would create the legal imbroglio that you envision now, he wasn't going to go there. Clearly, President Trump is going there and is likely to face very strong criticism from the Democratic governors of California and New Mexico, and they may well be the first in court to challenge him.
Ironically, in California, the wall has worked in the San Diego area, but this guy Gavin Newsom, I mean, pretty boy Gavin Newsom gets out there like he's a movie star. He thinks he's the next John F. Kennedy. And like Nancy Pelosi, in my opinion, he'll do anything, for a political angle here. And that's really tragic, particularly in those border states. But,
right.
Just generally speaking, John, I mean, I'm in Washington, D.C. today. I come here a lot. I spent 25 years here. I look up the street on Pennsylvania Avenue at the Capitol, and I just really get this sick feeling that they've accomplished little to nothing in the latter part of my lifetime here. And, you have to wonder what's really going to be going on up there in the future. What's your prediction with regard to the relationship between this president and Pelosi and Schumer? I mean, Schumer absolutely disgusts me. He just reeks of dishonesty. And Pelosi reeks of, in some degrees, such arrogance that it's really hard to just swallow. And I'm really sad, that our city has come to this.
If you take the last 2 years of Ronald Reagan's administration, when Iran-Contra came up, and remember that Democrats controlled both the House and the Senate, or the last 2 years of George W. Bush's administration, when Democrats controlled the House and the Senate and were thwarting him at every turn. You certainly recall the controversy over the firing of U.S. attorneys and how long that dragged out. I say take that, triple it, and that's what it will look like in Congress the remaining 2 years for President Trump. The one saving grace he has is a Senate that's in Republican hands by 53 to 47. But we also saw some Republican senators, notably Cory Gardner of Colorado, heading to the high grass on the reopening of the government and beating the president to the punch on it. So I don't think it's going to be a pretty picture ahead of time, and little things will metastasize into big controversies waged between both sides of Pennsylvania Avenue.
And layer that on top of the likelihood of impeachment starting in the House, a trial in the Senate. And this is why we at Freedom Watch, and people can go to freedomwatchusa.org to see what we're doing everything we can to defend this president, to keep him able to do his job. Regrettably, his lawyers have been dragged along lately, and Rudy Giuliani's made some statements which really confuse and muddle what's going on. And today, some of the statements that were coming out of them were also perplexing to me. But they've got to start taking action, and we hope that we can work in tandem to save this presidency, because if not, I believe, John, that the next president is going to be 100 times worse than Barack Obama.
Well, I can't argue with that, but remember, as Yogi Berra once said, never make predictions, especially about the future. One postscript. At this point in his presidency, only one president had lower approval ratings than Donald Trump does now. That was Ronald Reagan. And guess what? The following year, he carried all but one state in his reelection bid.
And I pray that you're right, and we're going to do everything we can to allow him to succeed, because I really, really love this president. And I think he has the opportunity, John, as much as I also loved Reagan, to be even greater than Reagan. In any event, thanks for coming on, good friend, and I hope to have you on in the future.
Call me anytime.
God bless.
Take care, Larry.
Bye-bye.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Here's the verdict, ladies and gentlemen. The indictment of Roger Stone shows that Jerry Corsi did no wrong. He's an extremely brave person. He's patriotic. He believes in the deity. We will get through this. The country will get through it. And Freedom Watch is the line of defense here for the president. We have many, many cases that are pending. I'm representing Dr. Corsi in his private capacity, but there are other matters that Freedom Watch is doing with regard to that and other issues, Freedom of Information Act requests and other things. And it's very, very important that you support what we're doing here at Freedom Watch, because we are, in effect, your private Justice Department. We heard a lot of information and a lot of analysis on how our Justice Department has broken down. We know that's happened this week. The appeal of Clive and Bundy is going forward. of course, about Cliven Bundy, go to clivenbundydefensefund.org, support that defense fund and get more information about that. Because Cliven Bundy was treated much like Dr. Corsi is being treated, and others have been treated. Our client, Schaefer Cox, they were really terrorized by the government, because if you ever question what the federal government does in this current climate, the Justice Department being so compromised and corrupted, they will try to crush you. And, of course, the Bundy indictment was dismissed about a year ago with prejudice. That means it should never, ever come back. They shouldn't have to be retried. Cliven and his sons were imprisoned for 2 years. Cliven was even thrown into solitary confinement for a while. He was denied right of counsel in the beginning. That was me. He wanted to hire me. And, of course, this leftist judge, appointed by Barack Obama and also recommended by Harry Reid, the evil Harry Reid, tried to keep me out of the case. I represented him in many other respects, and I was counseling everything that went on there, and I worked with Ryan Bundy. And many other things occurred. In 2 prior trials that occurred, there were either mistrials or verdicts against the government. But they pressed on, and they tried Cliven and his sons and other defendants, and eventually the judge was forced to dismiss that indictment because of so much prosecutorial misconduct, suppression of evidence, exculpatory evidence, threatening whistleblowers like Larry Wooten, who came forward, who was prepared to testify there was a kill list on the head of the Bundys. And with all of that, even though Jeff Sessions at the time, who was then Attorney General, said he'd review this with complaints that I had filed with the Office of Professional Responsibility, Inspector General, after all of that, after a year, they're proceeding with this appeal. It's going to be very costly. Cliven needs your support. He needs your prayers. If that's reversed, he'll be back in trial. He faces the possibility of life imprisonment, along with his sons and all the other defendants. So this is what's going on in America today. It's government tyranny. It's over the top. We do not have a Justice Department. We have a Department of Injustice. And at every step of the way, Special Counsel Mueller could have been reined in by initially Jeff Sessions, who was the Attorney General. Rod Rosenstein, of course, he's corrupt, and he's a Democrat in a skirt who wants to see the president destroyed. He's still there, by the way, and God knows what role he's playing at the Justice Department. And the Mueller prosecutors march on, but we have pushed back on behalf of Dr. Corsi. We not only have been truthful, we've been open, but we brought lawsuits to defend the rights not just of Dr. Corsi, but also the President of the United States and you, the American people. And Freedom Watch needs your support for everything we're doing. We have a leftist media strike force. We're holding the leftist media accountable. Everyone from the Washington Post to the New York Times to the Huffington Post, you name it, because someone needs to address the fake news that seeks to destroy people. And we, of course, we have other cases involving the social media companies who have been trying to brainwash the American people to remove this president, to go against our various clients. We have a class action on that. And, of course, our citizens' grand juries that we're beginning shortly to hold people accountable. With the people's justice, we have the right to do, according to the Justice Antonin Scalia many years ago with grand juries. They belong to the people. So please go to freedomwatchusa.org. Support our cause with tax-deductible contributions. Spread this radio show. Spread the word. We need to save this country and to save ourselves. So God bless you. God bless America. God save America. I'll be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.